Welcome to Book Summary Podcast, your gateway to personal transformation. Each episode delivers big ideas from the world's most impactful books on mindset, productivity, and success, all in just a few minutes. Ready to turn knowledge into action? Let's get started.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Today we're diving deep into, well, a topic that really affects every single one of us, right? Whether we want it to or not, money.
Definitely.
But look, this isn't about, trying to figure out complex algorithms or predict where the market's going next or memorizing tons of jargon.
Right, not the usual finance textbook stuff.
Exactly. Our mission today, really, is to explore this surprising truth. It's something we often overlook, I think, that doing well with money, it actually has less to do with how smart you are or what you learned in some finance class.
Much less than we tend to think.
Yeah, and a lot more to do with just your behavior, your emotional side, how resilient you are, and that unique psychological way you see the world. We're going to unpack why money often confuses us, why we make decisions that maybe on the surface seem totally irrational, and crucially, how really understanding this human element, this deep psychological part, can be maybe your single biggest financial asset.
That's such an important way to frame it. It really is. And what's truly fascinating here is how universally money impacts, well, everything in our lives.
Yeah.
Kind of like our health.
Exactly like health.
Yet our collective understanding of it, it often lags way behind. We tend to treat finance like it's physics, full of hard rules and laws that are predictable.
Right, like there's always a right answer.
But our sources, especially this book, The Psychology of Money, they argue it's far more like psychology. It's packed with emotions, biases, and these nuanced, sometimes unpredictable human reactions. And this brings up a really fundamental question for us to dig into today. Why do so many incredibly smart people, highly educated people, struggle so much with money?
Yeah, you see that all the time.
While others who maybe seem less equipped on paper achieve amazing financial success. And maybe more importantly for you listening, how can we all make better, more solid financial decisions by actually embracing these soft skills, the stuff that conventional education often just ignores?
Okay, so let's jump right into that first powerful insight. And it's one that might sound a bit, well, counterintuitive at first. When it comes to money and the choices people make with it,
Yeah.
nobody's actually crazy.
Right. Which sounds odd, doesn't it?
It really does, because we all see people making choices that seem absolutely wild sometimes. Gambling savings away, investing in something totally out there.
Yeah, things that make you scratch your head.
But our sources are suggesting there's a really deep-rooted, very personal reason behind every single one of those choices.
Indeed. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's really about recognizing that everyone, absolutely everyone, comes to their financial decisions with a deeply personal and utterly unique history with money.
Okay.
I mean, picture Ronald James Read. He was a janitor, a gas station attendant in rural Vermont. His life was, well, pretty low-key. Fixed cars, swept floors, lived in this modest little house his whole life. Yet when he passed away at 92, he had over $8 million. Left millions to his local hospital, the library.
Wow, $8 million.
Oh. His secret, it was almost unbelievably simple. He just saved what little he could consistently, and he invested it in blue chip stocks for decades, just patiently waiting while those tiny savings compounded into this huge fortune.
Just patience and consistency.
Exactly. Now contrast that story with Richard Fuscone, Harvard-educated, Merrill Lynch executive, MBA, praised for his business savvy, right?
The opposite end of the spectrum, seemingly.
Totally. Retired in his 40s, living this incredibly lavish lifestyle, had parties on a see-through cover over his indoor pool.
Okay, fancy.
Right. But despite that elite background, that huge early success, he later went broke. Lost his homes to foreclosure in the 2008 crisis.
No kidding, after all that.
Yeah. So you have these two men, one with zero formal financial education, the other a supposed genius in the field. Their outcomes couldn't be more different. And it just profoundly illustrates that financial success isn't some hard science you cram from a textbook.
It's not about the IQ points.
No, it's a soft skill. It's driven by very individual behavior, patience, perspective, things like that.
And this is where it gets really interesting for us, for you listening. Our sources powerfully explain that our personal experiences with money, the economy we grew up in, the lessons our parents taught us, maybe the booms and busts we saw firsthand.
Those formative years.
That stuff makes up such a tiny, tiny fraction, maybe 0.0000001% of everything that's actually happened in the world, financially speaking, historically.
An infinitesimal slice.
Right. But these intensely personal experiences, they can account for maybe 80% of how we truly believe the world works, how money works.
That's a huge disconnect.
It is. Think about it. Someone who grew up in, say, deep poverty, their perception of financial risk, of opportunity, it's going to be fundamentally different from the child of a wealthy investment banker.
Completely different worlds.
Their whole worldview, their gut instincts about money, shaped by these drastically different realities. Or consider someone who lived through the crazy inflation of the 60s and 70s. They saw prices triple when they were young and impressionable.
Yeah, that leaves a mark.
They're going to view holding cash versus assets very differently than someone born in the 1990s, right? For whom inflation has been, like, barely noticeable.
It's almost abstract for younger generations.
Or picture the contrast between someone who actually lived through the Great Depression, felt those scars of loss, the uncertainty, compared to someone like, say, John F. Kennedy, came from huge wealth. He learned about the Depression by reading about it at Harvard.
Just reading about it.
Yeah. Studying history makes you feel like you understand something, sure. But until you've truly lived through it, felt the consequences, the emotional weight, you might not grasp it deeply enough to actually change your behavior, to shift that ingrained perspective you have.
That really brings up a crucial question for all of us, doesn't it? How can we genuinely understand or even fairly judge someone else's financial decisions without understanding that deep, personal, formative history that shapes their whole relationship with money?
It's a tough one. We judge so quickly.
We do. And the example of lottery tickets is incredibly poignant here. Did you know Americans spend more on lottery tickets than on movies, video games, music, sports events, and books combined?
Wow, combined. That's staggering.
It is. And the vast majority are bought by the lowest income households. They spend, on average, over $400 a year. This is when, nearly 40% of Americans can't even come up with $400 for an emergency.
So it seems completely irrational on the surface.
To many people with financial security, yes, it looks crazy and irrational gamble, but put yourself in the shoes of someone maybe trapped in generational poverty. Buying that lottery ticket, it might represent the only tangible dream they feel they have. A dream of escaping, of affording the good stuff others take for granted: a safe home, maybe reliable transport, health insurance, a vacation.
They're buying hope, essentially.
In a very real sense, yes.
Yeah.
They're paying for a dream, a tiny sliver of hope. And for many of us, it's hard to get our heads around that impulse because we're already living a life that, to them, is the dream.
That's a powerful perspective shift.
Understanding that profound difference in experience is absolutely crucial. For less judgment, for more empathy, and ultimately for making better decisions ourselves. It's a reminder that very few people make financial decisions purely looking at a spreadsheet.
Right.
They make them at the dinner table, or in a stressful meeting, or maybe in a moment of desperation or intense hope. And personal history, ego, pride, weird incentives, they all get scrambled together into a story that just makes sense to them in that moment.
Okay, so moving beyond those very personal experiences, let's unpack another really critical element our sources highlight. These often unseen forces of luck and risk. We often love to think success is all about effort and skill, right? And failure is just the opposite.
We definitely prefer that narrative.
But our deep dive suggests there's a much broader, much more complex truth playing out.
Yeah, what's truly fascinating here is this idea that luck and risk are basically, well, they're siblings, two sides of the same coin, fundamentally linked.
Siblings, okay.
They both acknowledge that every outcome in life, good or bad, is influenced by these powerful forces that are just beyond our individual effort or our perfect decisions. The world's just too complex, right? Too messy to allow 100% of your actions to dictate 100% of your outcomes.
Makes sense. Can't control everything.
Think about Bill Gates. Our sources point out he had this incredible 1 in a million luck. He attended one of the only high schools in the entire world with a computer back in 1968.
Wow, 1968. That's early.
Incredibly early. And it wasn't just any computer. It was advanced enough for him and Paul Allen to really mess around with, experiment, become experts years before most universities had anything comparable. That unique access came down to a forward-thinking teacher, even a Mother's Club rummage sale. Just extraordinary luck.
That's amazing.
Now, contrast that sharply with Kent Evans, Gates' best friend. By Gates' own admission, Kent was equally skilled, maybe even better, the best student in their class. They dreamed together about starting companies. But Kent died in a mountaineering accident before graduating high school. The odds of that, roughly 1 in a million.
Oh, wow. That's tragic.
So Bill Gates experiences 1 in a million luck. Kent Evans experiences 1 in a million risk. The exact same powerful, random force just working in opposite, totally life-altering directions.
So what does this really mean for us? What's the takeaway? Well, the profound insight here seemed to be that every outcome, whether we're talking about our own successes and failures or judging others, it's never purely as good or as bad as it looks on the surface.
Exactly. There's always more to the story.
And our sources give this powerful warning. Don't attribute 100% of outcomes just to effort and decisions. It's just not accurate.
Yeah.
This is precisely why focusing less on those extreme individual stories, the billionaire who made it against all odds, or the catastrophic failure.
Right, the outlier.
And focusing more on broad patterns, on behaviors that are widely applicable. That's absolutely crucial. Because the more extreme the outcome, the less likely you can really apply its specific lessons to your own life. Because it was probably influenced by those extreme ends of luck or risk. As Bill Gates himself said, right? Success is a lousy teacher.
Yeah, it seduces smart people into thinking they can't lose.
And the flip side is true, too. Failure can be just as misleading. It can make us think our decisions were awful when maybe sometimes they just reflected the harsh, unpredictable realities of risk that were completely outside our control.
Precisely. Trying to perfectly emulate someone like Warren Buffett, his results are just so extreme, so unique. It's difficult, maybe impossible, because the role of luck in his lifetime performance is undoubtedly huge. And luck, well, you can't reliably copy luck, can you?
No, definitely not.
So if we connect this back to the bigger picture, it's much more actionable, more practical, to look for common, repeatable patterns that lead to general well-being. For instance, our sources emphasize that people who consistently gain more control over their time tend to be happier.
Control over time. That's interesting.
Yeah, that's a broad, observable pattern you can actually act on. Unlike trying to replicate some unique mix of skill and just extraordinary, unrepeatable luck. The real trick, especially when dealing with the possibility of failure, is arranging your financial life so you can absorb the inevitable blows.
Building resilience.
Exactly. A bad investment here, missing a financial goal there. Those shouldn't wipe you out. The goal is to stay in the game long enough, keep playing, so that over time the statistical odds can eventually fall in your favor. It's about recognizing that for every Bill Gates, there's a Ken Evans who was just as smart, just as driven,
Right.
but just tragically ended up on the other side of that unpredictable roulette wheel of life. Nothing is ever quite as good or quite as bad as it seems. Luck and risk are always there, unseen.
That idea of understanding our personal viewpoint and the role of luck, it leads us right into a related and often really destructive aspect of money. This relentless chase for never enough.
The hunger for more.
Yeah, we've all felt that pull, haven't we? Wanting more money, more success, more stuff. But our sources shed a pretty stark light on where that insatiable appetite can really lead us astray.
It's an incredibly powerful drive, and what's truly fascinating, maybe terrifying, is the cautionary tale of Rajat Gupta.
The former McKinsey CEO.
That's him. Rose from poverty in Kolkata to become one of the most successful businessmen on the planet. By 2008, he was worth, reportedly, a staggering $100 million.
$100 million. Hard to even imagine.
Right. An unfathomable sum for most people. Yet he craved more. He desperately wanted to be a billionaire, to be in that exclusive billionaire circle.
Even with $100 million.
Even then. And his insatiable ambition led him down a dark path. Insider trading. He tipped off a hedge fund manager about Warren Buffett's $5 billion investment in Goldman Sachs, literally seconds after a private board meeting ended.
Wow.
He risked absolutely everything he had, his prestige, his power, his freedom for more, and he ended up in prison.
Just threw it all away.
And similarly, think about Bernie Madoff. Before his infamous Ponzi scheme became known, he actually ran a wildly successful, totally legitimate market-making business. It made him genuinely wealthy, earning maybe $25 to $50 million a year. Legitimate.
So he was already incredibly rich.
Exactly. Yet even that wasn't enough. He still committed this massive, decades-long fraud. It raises this really crucial kind of haunting question. Why would someone with hundreds of millions, someone who already has everything anyone could dream of, why would they be so desperate for even more?
Yeah.
They just had no sense of enough.
These are extreme examples, obviously, but that underlying behavior, it resonates with so many of us, maybe on a smaller scale.
Absolutely.
The sources point out a key lesson from Warren Buffett himself, actually, talking about that long-term capital management failure back in '98.
Ah, yes, the geniuses who blew up.
Right. This hedge fund, run by brilliant traders, Nobel laureates even. They were personally worth tens, hundreds of millions. Yet they made these incredibly leveraged bets and lost everything.
Right.
Right in the middle of a booming market.
Incredible timing.
And Buffett just nailed their folly, he said. To make money they didn't have and didn't need, they risked what they did have and did need. And that's foolish. It is just plain foolish.
That cuts deep, doesn't it?
It really does. It's such a profound reminder that there's just no good reason to risk what's truly important, your security, your reputation, your freedom, for something that really is ultimately unimportant, like chasing some arbitrary higher number.
Indeed. And if we connect that to the bigger picture, maybe the single hardest financial skill for anyone to master is simply getting the goalpost to stop moving.
Getting the goalpost to stop moving.
Happiness, right. It's often framed as results minus expectations. If your expectations just keep rising right along with your results, or even faster, well, there's no logical point in striving for more, is there? You'll always feel the same, even after putting in all that extra effort.
You're just perpetually dissatisfied.
Exactly. And it gets really dangerous when that first taste of having more money, power, prestige increases your ambition faster than it actually delivers genuine satisfaction. In that scenario, every step forward just pushes the goalpost 2 steps ahead. You constantly feel like you're falling behind, chasing this horizon that keeps receding.
Exhausting.
And the only way you feel you can catch up is by taking on greater and greater risk. Social comparison is a huge driver here. A rookie baseball player making $500,000 a year, objectively rich.
Absolutely.
But standing next to Mike Trout in his $430 million contract, he might genuinely feel broke.
Perspective is everything.
It is. The ceiling for social comparison is just astronomically high. Virtually no one will ever hit it, which means it's a battle you can never truly win. Or maybe the only way to win is to just not fight that battle in the first place.
Opt out.
Yeah, opt out. Accept and embrace that you might have enough, even if it's less than others, or less than what society screams you need. Enough isn't about being timid or lacking ambition. It's about realizing that an insatiable, moving goalpost appetite for more will almost inevitably push you to regret, maybe even to the point of breaking financially.
Right. Okay, so when we typically think about building wealth, our minds often jump to, finding the next hot stock or uncovering some hidden gem asset or making huge, fast returns.
The quick win mentality.
Yeah, exactly. But our deep dive today reveals a far more subtle, yet, exponentially more powerful force at play.
Compounding.
Compounding. The 8th wonder, some say. And what's truly fascinating here is how something so seemingly small, almost invisible day to day, can lead to such extraordinary, almost overwhelming results over time. Think about ice ages, right? For centuries, scientists couldn't figure out the sheer energy needed to cyclically freeze and melt huge parts of the planet.
Yeah, seems like it would take massive force. But the answer wasn't some huge, violent force. It was something as subtle as a tiny, almost insignificant change in the Earth's orbital tilt. That tiny shift lets slightly more sunlight melt just a bit more snowpack each winter.
Okay.
And that tiny change then compounds over thousands, millions of years. Less reflected sunlight means slightly warmer temperatures, prevents a bit more snow the next year, and this self-reinforcing cycle continues until the whole Earth is covered in miles-thick ice.
Wow, from such a tiny beginning.
Exactly, as one glaciologist put it perfectly. It is not necessarily the amount of snow that causes ice sheets, but the fact that snow, however little, lasts.
Oh.
Persistence. Compounding.
So how does this translate to our money, to our financial lives? It means fundamentally you don't need tremendous force. You don't need crazy high returns or wild one-off investment hits to get tremendous financial results.
You really don't.
And here's where it really stands out when you look at the evidence. Warren Buffett's staggering fortune. It isn't just because he's an exceptionally good investor, which, okay, he obviously is.
Undeniably.
But it's perhaps even more profoundly because he's been a good investor since he was literally a child.
As he was 10.
10 years old.
Yeah.
He started serious investing then. By age 30, he had $1 million, which adjusted for inflation today is what, over $9 million?
Yeah, a huge amount. And our sources even give this fascinating comparison to Jim Simons from Renaissance Technologies.
Oh, a quant fund, Rentep.
That's the one. Simons has compounded money at an incredible 66% annually since 1988. That rate is literally 3 times higher than Buffett's 22% average.
3 times higher, so Simons must be way richer then.
You'd think so, right? But no, despite that far superior annual percentage, Simons is still about 75% less rich than Buffett.
How is that even possible?
Simple time. Simons only really found his stride and started Rentec when he was 50. So he's had less than half the number of years for compounding to work its magic compared to Buffett.
Time is the missing ingredient.
Massively. If Simons had managed that 66% annual return for the same 70-plus years Buffett has been investing, he'd be worth, well, the number is $63 quintillion. It's basically meaningless. It's so huge.
Okay, my brain just broke trying to imagine that number.
Exactly. And that profound difference really raises an important question for all of us. Why is something so powerful, so fundamental like compounding, why is it so incredibly hard for our brains to intuitively grasp?
Yeah, why don't we just get it?
Because our brains are wired for linear thinking. Compounding requires exponential thinking. If I ask you to quickly add 8 plus 8 plus 8.9 times, you can probably do it. It's 72.
Okay, yeah, manageable.
But if I ask you to calculate 8 times 8.9 times, your head explodes. It's over 134 million.
Whoa, okay, big difference.
That's the difference. Linear versus exponential. We see this bias everywhere. Think about hard drive storage, decades of slow, almost linear growth. Then, boom, megabytes to gigabytes to terabytes in just a few years.
Right, it accelerates incredibly fast at the end.
We consistently underestimate compounding's power because it starts so subtly, builds momentum slowly. Maybe the best investing book should just be titled, Shut Up and Wait.
I like that.
It's hard for us to fully wrap our heads around it, which is precisely why we often ignore its potential. We're always looking for faster ways to get rich. But the real secret to good investing isn't necessarily earning the absolute highest returns. Those are often one-off hits, flashes in the pan, really hard to repeat consistently.
Right.
It's about earning pretty good, solid returns that you can actually stick with and repeat for the longest possible time.
Consistency and duration.
That's when compounding truly runs wild. That's when it transforms small efforts into magnificent outcomes.
Okay, so it's one thing to make a fortune, right? To build significant wealth through compounding or other means. But our sources make this compelling, critical argument that it's an entirely different skill, maybe even more crucial to actually hold on to it.
Yes.
They suggest the ultimate financial skill isn't getting wealthy, it's staying wealthy.
That's a fantastic point. If we connect this to the bigger picture, the single most important word to sum up long-term money success probably isn't growth or returns. It's survival.
Survival. Okay.
Getting money is one challenge. Keeping it, especially over the long haul, through all the ups and downs, that's another challenge entirely. Take the story of Jesse Livermore, arguably the greatest stock market trader of his day, made inflation-adjusted $100 million by age 30, made an absolute fortune shorting the market during the 1929 crash. Genius insights.
Right, legendary trader.
Legendary. Yet despite his undeniable brilliance, he eventually lost it all. Several times over, actually, and tragically took his own life.
Wow. So brilliant at getting rich, but couldn't hold on.
Exactly. And similarly, Abraham Jermansky, a multi-millionaire real estate developer, lost every single penny in that same 29 crash, ended up tearing ticker tape into bits on Wall Street in despair. Both were exceptionally brilliant at getting wealthy, but equally terrible at staying wealthy. They failed the ultimate test. Endurance?
Survival. And this is where it gets really compelling. Our sources highlight a massively successful venture capital firm, Sequoia Capital.
Ah, Sequoia. Titans of VC.
Right. And they attribute their 4 decades of incredible success, not primarily to, their growth numbers or the individual brains of their partners or even their unique market insights.
What then?
Instead, they attribute it to a profound, almost paralyzing fear of going out of business.
Fear. That's interesting.
Yeah. Their enduring mantra is, only the paranoid survive. They don't rest on their laurels. They constantly assume tomorrow won't be like yesterday. They're always adapting, never complacent. This ability just to stick around for a really long time, to avoid getting wiped out or being forced to quit, that's truly what makes the biggest difference in financial success. It's about being anti-fragile, surviving.
What's truly fascinating here is how Warren Buffett's own longevity perfectly illustrates this principle.
Right.
We, quite understandably, analyze his brilliant investment moves, right? Dissect every stock pick, every acquisition.
Of course, that's where the focus usually is.
But equally important, maybe even more important to his multi-decade success, is what he didn't do.
Okay, what didn't he do?
He didn't get carried away with excessive debt. He didn't panic and sell everything during the 14 recessions he's lived through.
14? Wow.
He didn't tarnish his impeccable business reputation with scandals. He didn't rigidly cling to just one strategy or one worldview, but stayed adaptable. And critically, he didn't burn out and quit or retire too early. He simply survived.
He stayed in the game.
He stayed in the game. And that survival gave him unimaginable longevity. And that longevity investing consistently from age 10 to, well, he's still going strong today in his 90s, that's what let compounding work its wonders for him. So this raises an important question for each of us. How do we cultivate this essential survival mindset in our own finances?
Yeah, how do we do that?
It means prioritizing being financially unbreakable, financially resilient, more than chasing the absolute biggest returns possible. Holding what seems like a lot of cash during a roaring bull market, it might feel like you're giving up returns. You're acutely aware of what you're missing out on, right?
Yeah, FOMO is real.
Totally. But if that very cash prevents you from being forced to sell your stocks at the absolute bottom during a crushing bear market, well, its real return isn't just the tiny interest it earns. Its real return could be huge, because preventing just one desperate, badly timed sale can do more for your lifetime returns than picking dozens of supposed winners.
That makes a lot of sense. Insurance against disaster.
Exactly. It means planning on your plan, not going according to plan. Just think of all the unforeseen, world-shaking events in just the last 20 years alone. 9/11, the housing boom and bust, the global financial crisis, a record stock market rally after that, then a global pandemic.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride.
A truly good financial plan embraces that inherent uncertainty. It builds in plenty of room for error, what finance folks call a margin of safety. This allows you to live happily, securely, with a wide range of possible outcomes. You achieve it by maybe having a frugal budget, flexible thinking about your goals, and a loose timeline for when you expect things to happen.
So what does this all mean for us, for you listening? What's the practical approach? It means cultivating what our sources call a barbelled personality with your finances.
A barbelled personality. Okay, explain that.
It means being deeply optimistic about the long-term future, really believing the odds are in your favor over time, that progress continues, markets generally rise.
Okay, the optimistic side.
But at the same time, being intensely paranoid about anything and everything that could possibly prevent you from getting to that optimistic future. Knowing the road is filled with unexpected landmines and curveballs.
Optimistic outlook, paranoid execution.
Exactly. It means consciously avoiding single points of failure in your financial life. Like relying solely on your paycheck for all your spending, with zero savings for emergencies.
Right, needing that buffer.
Because, as our sources powerfully remind us, everything that can break will eventually break. You can plan meticulously for every risk you can think of, but it's often the things that are too crazy to even imagine, like, field mice shutting down tanks or a burst water pipe flooding an office.
The black swans, the weird stuff.
Yeah, those crazy things happen more often than you think, and they can do the most harm precisely because you have no plan for them. That margin of safety is your defense against those unknown unknowns. Okay, so beyond just surviving financially, what then is the ultimate goal? What's the highest purpose of money? Our deep dive suggests it's maybe not what most people think. It's about freedom.
Freedom, yes. What's truly fascinating here is how money's greatest intrinsic value, its most profound power, is really its ability to give you control over your most precious asset, your time.
Control over time. We touched on that earlier.
We did. And psychologist Angus Campbell, who spent his career studying what makes people happy, found this incredibly consistent pattern. He said, having a strong sense of controlling one's life is a more dependable predictor of positive feelings of well-being than any of the objective conditions of life we have considered. And that included things like your salary, how big your house is, even how prestigious your job title is.
More important than salary or house size. Wow.
The message is crystal clear. Money's greatest intrinsic value, a value we just cannot overstate, is its unique ability to give you control over your time. It helps you get, bit by bit, a level of independence, of autonomy that comes from having unspent assets. Assets that give you greater control over what you can do, when you can do it, and who you do it with. This raises a really important, deeply personal question for each of us, doesn't it? Are we truly using our wealth to buy time and options, to buy genuine freedom, or are we just using it to buy more stuff, more possessions, more external signs of success that don't actually increase our internal sense of control?
That's such a powerful distinction to make. Consider the story of Derek Sivers, the entrepreneur.
Yeah, his story is great.
Early in his career, he had a day job, paid about $20,000 a year. Decent, right? He lived super frugally, like $1,000 a month. By age 22, he'd saved $12,000.
Okay, $12,000. Seems modest.
Modest, but for him, that wasn't just savings. It was his ticket to freedom. It meant he could quit his job and become a full-time musician, just getting a few gigs a month to cover his basic living expenses.
He bought his time back.
Exactly. And he explicitly says that moment, the moment he gained control over his time, could pursue his passion on his own terms. That's when the difference happened in his life. Not years later when he eventually sold his company for millions.
Right, the millions were secondary.
When asked about those millions, he just said it was just more money in the bank. The control over his time, the ability to do what he wanted when he wanted. That was priceless. It perfectly illustrates that even doing something you absolutely love, if it's on a rigid schedule you can't control, can eventually feel just like doing something you hate. The value is in the autonomy.
It really is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it helps explain a curious paradox. Despite the U.S. being the richest nation in history, Americans aren't necessarily happier than they were back in the 1950s when wealth and income were much lower.
Yeah, that's always struck me as strange.
A 2019 Gallup poll found 45% of Americans felt a lot of worry the previous day. 55% felt a lot of stress. That's higher than the global average.
Higher than the global average, wow.
And while we as a society have used our increased wealth to buy bigger homes, faster cars, more consumer goods, we've often, at the same time, given up control over our time. Think about the shift from manual labor to knowledge work. Your factory is now your head, right? And it never really leaves you.
You're always on.
Always on, 200/7. Thinking about work during your commute, making dinner, putting kids to sleep, waking up stressed at 3 a.m. This pervasive loss of time control, which is such a key driver of happiness, directly explains why greater wealth hasn't automatically brought greater happiness at a societal level.
Makes sense.
As gerontologist Carl Pillemer found interviewing hundreds of elderly Americans for his book, not a single person said happiness came from making more money to buy more things or keeping up with the Joneses. What they valued: quality friendships, being part of something bigger than themselves, spending quality, unstructured time with their kids.
The human connections, the purpose.
Exactly. Control over your time truly is the highest dividend money pays. It's a far more valuable asset than any material possession you can buy.
That understanding of true value leads us right into a crucial but often really misunderstood concept: the fundamental difference between being rich and being wealthy.
Ah, yes, rich versus wealthy.
Many of us use those terms interchangeably, right? But our deep dive suggests there's a really vital distinction we need to grasp.
There absolutely is. And what's fascinating here, and quite insightful, is what our sources call the man in the car paradox.
Okay, the man in the car paradox. Tell me more.
The author, who apparently worked as a valet, saw this firsthand. When you see someone driving a really fancy, expensive car like a Ferrari or something, you rarely, if ever, think to yourself, wow, the person driving that car is so cool, so impressive. Instead, almost subconsciously, your thought process is more like, wow, if I had that car, people would think I'm cool.
That's so true. You project yourself onto it.
Exactly. We aspire to be respected, admired, get positive attention. But using money to buy flashy, visible things often brings less of that genuine respect than we imagine, precisely because other people are focused on their own aspirations, their own desires. They're looking at the car, imagining themselves driving it, not really giving the actual driver much thought at all.
So the flashy purchase doesn't achieve the underlying goal.
Often not. Which raises that important question. Why do we so often confuse these outward displays of luxury with true financial success if they don't actually get us the respect and admiration we're ultimately seeking?
So what does this all boil down to then? What's the real difference? Well, our sources tell us this powerful truth. Wealth is what you don't see.
Wealth is hidden.
Right. Someone driving a brand new $100,000 luxury car, they might be considered rich because, yeah, they probably have a high income to afford those big monthly payments. But here's the kicker. That car also means they have $100,000 less than they did before, or maybe $100,000 more in debt.
It's money spent, not money saved.
Exactly. We tend to judge financial success by what's visible, the expensive cars, the huge houses, the perfect Instagram vacations, because that's the only information we can easily see. But wealth, true wealth, it's fundamentally income not spent. It's the nice cars not purchased, the diamonds not bought, the designer watches not worn, the fancy clothes left on the rack. It's hidden. It's made up financial assets that haven't been converted into visible stuff yet. It's the quiet power of just deferred gratification.
Indeed. And if we connect that to the bigger picture, it reveals a really profound misunderstanding many people have. When most people say they want to be a millionaire, what they actually mean is, I'd like to spend $1 million.
Right. The spending part sounds fun.
And that, quite literally, is the exact opposite of being a millionaire. The only way to truly be wealthy is to not spend the money that you do have. It's not just the only path to accumulating wealth, it's the very definition of wealth itself.
That requires discipline.
A significant amount of self-control, yeah. And humility. It's about creating and maintaining that consistent gap between your ego and your income. The problem is, it's incredibly hard to learn this by imitating others, because wealth, by its very nature, is hidden.
You can't copy what you can't see.
Precisely. Ronald Read, the quiet janitor, he wasn't anyone's financial role model while he was living, because every penny of his wealth was unseen, quietly invested. He looked modest, lived simply. This fundamental invisibility really helps explain why building wealth is so challenging for so many. We're inherently good at learning by imitation, but you just can't imitate what you can't see.
Okay, so in the world of finance, we're constantly told, be rational.
Right.
Yeah. Follow the numbers, make cold, calculated decisions based purely on math.
That's the standard advice, definitely. Optimize everything.
But our deep dive today really challenges that conventional wisdom. It powerfully suggests that being reasonable is often a far more effective and, frankly, more sustainable path to long-term financial success.
Reasonable over rational, I like that. What's truly fascinating here is an analogy from medical history. Think of Julius Wagner-Jauregg. 19th century psychiatrist actually won the Nobel Prize for curing syphilis by intentionally giving people malaria to induce fevers.
Wait, giving them malaria, seriously?
Seriously. He'd noticed syphilis patients sometimes got better if they had long fevers from other illnesses. So he made the leap. Inject them with malaria, trigger fevers. And it worked surprisingly often.
That sounds intense.
Medically, it's rational, right? Fevers can help fight infection. A 1-degree rise in body temp can slow virus replication by like 200 times.
Okay, so there's logic to it.
But here's the human element. Fevers hurt a lot. And people fundamentally do not want to hurt.
Understandable.
So doctors and patients universally suppress fevers with Tylenol and whatnot, despite the potential scientific benefits, which raises this important question across medicine and finance. Why do we so often fight what's technically good for us? Because it might be rational to want a fever for its medical upside, but it's not reasonable given the profound human discomfort, the aversion to pain. The same philosophy applies powerfully to money. A doctor's goal isn't just to cure disease, but to cure it within the limits of what's reasonable and tolerable for the patient.
So what does this amazing story mean for our money? How does it connect? Well, academic finance often searches for those mathematically optimal strategies, right? The theoretically perfect portfolio allocation that promises the absolute highest return.
The holy grail of optimization.
But in the real world, people rarely want the mathematically optimal strategy. What they truly want, what they intuitively move towards, is the strategy that maximizes how well they sleep at night.
Ah, the sleep at night test. That's key.
Our sources bring up Harry Markowitz, Nobel laureate, famous for his work on risk and return trade-offs. The math guy.
Right, modern portfolio theory.
Yet Markowitz himself famously structured his own personal retirement portfolio, not to purely maximize returns, but to minimize future regret. He just split it 50-50 between bonds and stocks. That strategy might be hard to perfectly rationalize on paper for pure return maximization.
Definitely not optimal in the strictest sense.
But it's incredibly easy to justify in real life, especially when you factor in social pressures from coworkers, or wanting to avoid disappointing your spouse, or even that silly but real competition you feel with your brother-in-law or neighbor.
Right, those real-world emotional factors.
Investing just has this social and emotional component that's way too often ignored when you only look at it through a purely mathematical lens.
Indeed. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, consider a Yale study. It once showed that young savers would be mathematically better off using 2-to-1 leverage on stocks.
Leveraging. So borrowing to invest more.
Exactly. Borrowing money to amplify investments, which boosts potential gains but hugely amplifies risk too. The study concluded that even if a 50% market drop wiped them out completely, they'd still be mathematically better off long-term if they just picked themselves back up and kept going with the same strategy.
Okay, mathematically rational maybe,
Well,
but sounds terrifying.
it's rational on paper, but absurdly unreasonable in reality. No normal person could watch their entire retirement account evaporate, go through that trauma, and be so unaffected they just carry on exactly as before.
No way. You'd change course. Or twit.
You'd quit, you'd look for something else, you might even sue your advisor. It highlights this crucial point. Something can be technically true, but contextually nonsense.
Context is everything.
Commitment to a strategy, sticking with it, especially during the tough years, the lean years, that is absolutely critical. So if loving your investments, if having some genuine emotional connection or belief in them helps you stick with them when they're volatile, when they test your patience, if that emotion provides the sheer endurance you need to let the long-term odds work in your favor, then what looks like irrational emotion actually becomes a significant quantifiable advantage. It's all about endurance over pure optimization.
Endurance over optimization. I like that framing. Okay, we humans, we inherently crave predictability, don't we?
Yeah.
Especially with something as vital as our money, our future.
We desperately want things to be certain.
But our deep dive today offers this powerful counter lesson. The world is inherently surprising, and accepting, even expecting the unexpected, is often your absolute best strategy.
Yeah, what's truly fascinating here is a profound observation from the political scientist Scott Sagan. He said, "Things that have never happened before happen all the time."
Things that have never happened before happen all the time.
Wow. History is in large part the study of surprising, unprecedented events. Yet we constantly fall into this trap of using history as some rigid, unshakable guide to the future.
We treat the past as prologue.
Exactly. Which raises an important question. How can we possibly plan effectively when the most impactful events, the ones that fundamentally reshape our world, our finances, are often these extreme outliers, these tail events as they're called, that defy any conventional prediction?
Right, the unpredictable shocks.
Consider that seemingly disconnected chain of events. 9/11 happens, leads to big Fed interest rate cuts. Those cuts help fuel a massive housing bubble. That bubble bursts, contributes directly to the 2008 financial crisis. And that crisis, in its aftermath, leads to policy shifts that eventually impact the massive student loan debt we see today.
It's a domino effect across decades.
It is. It's certainly not intuitive to directly link 19 hijackers in 2001 to today's student loan crisis, right? But that's exactly how a world driven by these tail events works. A handful of outlier events play this enormous role because they influence so many seemingly unrelated things in their wake, creating these unpredictable ripple effects.
So what does this all mean for us? How do we navigate this surprising world with our finances? Well, Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist, put it incredibly simply. He said, "The correct lesson to learn from surprises is that the world is surprising."
Simple but profound.
Right. Not that past surprises tell us what future surprises might look like, but just that we fundamentally have no idea what might happen next. We shouldn't use past surprises to draw rigid boundaries around future possibilities. Furthermore, our sources emphasize that relying too heavily on financial history can be really misleading because of constant structural changes in markets and society.
Things are always changing under the surface.
Think about it. The 401k, cornerstone of modern retirement. It's only about 42 years old. Venture capital as we know it barely existed 25 years ago. Now it's huge.
Relatively new inventions.
The S&P 500 didn't even include financial stocks until 1976. Tech stocks were practically non-existent in the index 50 years ago. Even the average time between U.S. recessions has changed dramatically over history.
But the whole landscape shifts.
The rules of the game, the opportunities, the players, they are constantly evolving, which means what worked perfectly yesterday, like maybe Benjamin Graham's specific stock formulas from The Intelligent Investor,
The classic value investing Bible.
it might not work the same way today. Graham himself kept discarding old formulas for new ones in each revised edition of his book.
That's telling, isn't it? Even the master knew things change. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the more extreme the outcome we're looking at, whether it's a Bill Gates level success or a massive economic collapse, the less likely you can directly apply its specific lessons to your own life.
Because of that luck and risk factor again.
Exactly. Extreme outcomes are almost always deeply influenced by extreme ends of luck or risk factors that just aren't repeatable or scalable for most people. This is precisely why it's far more productive to focus on broad patterns, on enduring principles of human behavior, rather than getting bogged down in specific trends or causal relationships about markets, which are always in flux.
Focus on the constants, not the variables.
Well put. And it's also crucial to understand that the common phrase, "it's different this time," surprisingly, it's often true for specific market trends and economic conditions, even if core human nature, our psychology, remains remarkably consistent across generations.
So you have to distinguish between the two.
You have to distinguish between general principles of human behavior, those are stable guides, and specific market trends or tech shifts, which are always evolving and defy easy prediction. This means accepting uncertainty, cultivating flexibility, and not trying to force some predictable, comforting story onto an inherently unpredictable world.
Okay, now let's talk about something many of us seem to gravitate towards, almost instinctively, even when maybe we shouldn't.
Pessimism.
Ah, the allure of pessimism.
Yeah, why is it so captivating? And how does this bias affect our financial outlook, our decisions?
It's a really curious phenomenon, isn't it? For reasons that are, frankly, still a bit mysterious, people genuinely seem to like hearing that the world is going to hell.
It does seem to get more attention. And what's truly fascinating here is how pessimism so often sounds inherently smarter, more sophisticated, more plausible than optimism. Think back to 2008, middle of the financial crisis. The Wall Street Journal runs a story about this Russian professor, Igor Panarin. He boldly predicts the U.S. will break into 6 pieces by 2010. Alaska goes back to Russia. California becomes part of China.
Wow, it's dramatic.
Super dramatic. And it sounded dire, therefore somehow intelligent, right? Now contrast that with post-WWII Japan, a nation absolutely gutted by war, cities in ruins, people starving.
Total devastation.
Imagine if, during that desperate time, some academic had stood up and predicted their economy would grow 15 times its size, life expectancy would nearly double, and they'd eventually own prime U.S. real estate.
Sounds completely unbelievable back then.
Totally delusional optimism, right? But it actually happened. Yet that forecast would have been laughed out of the room at the time. This stark contrast raises that important question. Why do we so readily accept, even applaud, these doom prophecies, but almost instinctively dismiss outrageous optimism, even when history shows that optimism often proves profoundly true?
Yeah, why is pessimism so much more credible?
Pessimism, for some reason, is just intellectually captivating. It grabs our attention much more powerfully.
So what does this all mean for us? Why are we wired this way? Well, part of it is probably evolutionary. We're hardwired as a species to prioritize threats over opportunities.
Survival instinct.
Right. Organisms that treated threats as more urgent than opportunities simply had a better chance to survive, pass on their genes. It's a deep-seated mechanism. But also, money's everywhere, touches everyone's life. So bad financial news affects everyone and inherently grabs widespread attention.
It's relevant to all of us.
Think about it. A 1% drop in the stock market. It's often reported in bold, all caps, blood red letters. Urgent analysis of why it happened. Whereas a 1% rise barely gets mentioned, often dismissed as just what's supposed to happen.
Yeah, the asymmetry is striking.
This fundamental imbalance in how news is presented is hard to avoid. Even if you don't own stocks, those scary headlines capture your attention, creating this pervasive feeling that disaster is always lurking, the ground is always shaky.
It feeds the anxiety. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it becomes clear that pessimists often make a critical mistake. They extrapolate current trends in a straight line into the future. They fail to account for how dynamic markets are, and crucially, how human ingenuity and adaptability constantly solve problems.
We find solutions.
We do. In 2008, for example, environmentalist Lester Brown predicted the world runs out of oil by 2030, assuming production wouldn't go much higher. But then came fracking, horizontal drilling, transformative technologies. U.S. oil production soared from 5 million barrels a day to 13 million by 2019. World production is now over 100 million barrels.
The predictions were completely wrong.
Because problems incentivize solutions. Threats stimulate innovation, often of equal or greater magnitude. That's a common plot in economic history that pessimists projecting straight lines easily forget.
Good point.
Furthermore, progress usually happens slowly, subtly, compounding over time. While setbacks, they're swift, dramatic, demand immediate attention. Think about the airplane. It took years for the public to really grasp and adopt, but a plane crash, instant global news.
Right, negative events are louder.
Similarly, the incredible 70% decline in heart disease death rates in the U.S. since 1965, saving 500,000 American lives every year, gets far less media attention than single acts of terrorism or isolated natural disasters.
We don't notice the slow positive trends as much.
Exactly. Success often comes with this invisible price tag, things like volatility, fear, doubt, moments of regret. We absolutely must be willing to view these not as fines or punishments for trying, but as fees, like the admission ticket you pay to achieve good returns over the long term.
A fee, not a fine. I like that.
Because progress takes time, and destruction can happen quickly. That's just the cost of admission to the game of long-term growth.
Okay, that brings us to arguably the most powerful, yet maybe the most elusive, force in not just the broad economy, but in our personal financial lives. The stories we tell ourselves. The narrative.
The power of narrative, yes. What's truly fascinating here is looking at the immediate aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis. Think about it. Our physical capacity for creating wealth for economic growth in 2009 was objectively identical to what it was in 2007.
Same factories, same people, same knowledge.
Exactly. Same cities, same tools, same skilled workforce. The only thing that fundamentally changed, the single most impactful shift, was the narrative we told ourselves. The story about housing prices always going up, about bankers being prudent, about risk being accurately priced. That story broke.
Crust evaporated.
Completely. And once that happened, once a new narrative of fear and uncertainty took hold, it led to cascading defaults, banks stopped lending, massive layoffs, a spiraling economic decline. Our sources call it narrative damage, and it was vicious in its impact.
Wow. So the story itself caused the damage.
Largely, yes. Which raises this profound question. How much are our financial outcomes, individually and collectively, really driven by tangible realities versus these incredibly powerful, often invisible collective stories? Stories are by far the most potent force in the economy. They can be the fuel for growth or the brake that halts progress, even when the underlying tangible capabilities haven't changed at all.
So what does this mean for you, the individual listener, trying to navigate your own financial path? How does this apply? It means that the more you desperately want something to be true, whether it's wanting a specific investment to skyrocket or believing in a quick, easy path to wealth.
The appeal of the quick fix.
The more likely you are to believe a story, any story, that overestimates its odds of success. This tendency creates what our sources call appealing fictions.
Appealing fictions. I like that term.
When the stakes are incredibly high and your sense of control feels really limited, like during the Great Plague in London, where desperate people bought infallible preventive pills from snake oil salesmen.
Right, grasping at straws.
We become incredibly willing to believe almost anything that offers even a tiny glimmer of hope. Ali Hijazi, a father whose son was terribly sick in Yemen, put it perfectly. When you have no money and your son is sick, you'll believe anything. When he was considering some painful folk remedy.
That's heartbreaking, but so human.
That principle applies powerfully to money, too. Why do people consistently listen to investment gurus with notoriously bad track records? Or fall for elaborate Ponzi schemes like Madoff's?
Yeah, why do we fall for it?
His consistent, too-good-to-be-true returns, his secrecy. They should have been massive red flags. But the perceived rewards for being right, for getting rich quickly, are just immensely appealing, and we as humans desperately want to believe they're possible.
We want the story to be true, indeed. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is precisely why building in that room for error, maintaining flexibility, cultivating genuine financial independence, these aren't just nice ideas. They are absolutely indispensable.
They're protective measures.
Exactly. They create that crucial gap between what you want to be true about your financial future and what needs to be true for you to have an acceptable outcome. This vital buffer protects you from falling victim to those seductive, appealing financial fictions. Look at the Federal Reserve's own economic growth predictions for 2008 and 2009, made back in 2007. Their low-end estimate was 1.6% growth. The economy actually contracted by over 2%.
They were way off.
Way off. That optimistic forecast was an appealing fiction. Expecting anything worse, admitting the severity of what was coming, was just too painful, too disruptive to really consider at the time. We also have this deeply ingrained, almost primal need to believe we live in a predictable, controllable world.
We hate uncertainty.
We do. So we cling to forecasts, to expert predictions, even though market predictions are notoriously, consistently inaccurate. This illusion of control, this comforting narrative of predictability, is often far more persuasive and emotionally satisfying than the stark reality of uncertainty.
We prefer the comforting story, even if it's wrong.
We often do. We're like that alien circling Earth. In our sources, we think we know what's happening based on what we see externally, spending, market moves. But we're often completely wrong because we simply can't know the deeply personal stories, the fears, the hopes, the biases going on inside everyone else's head, driving their decisions.
Okay, we have certainly unpacked a lot today, haven't we?
We really have covered a lot of ground.
From those deep historical anecdotes to profound psychological tendencies and all the very human biases that shape our money decisions. So what does all of this mean for you listening? What are the practical, actionable takeaways, the universal truths that really emerge from our sources that you can apply to your own financial life?
That's the key question, right? What do we do with all this? And what's fascinating here is thinking about that analogy with the medical profession again. For most of history, doctors basically dictated treatment. Patients had little say.
Right, doctor knows best.
Exactly. Now, patient consent is paramount. Why? Because doctors finally recognize that patients have wildly different values, different perspectives on what's worth it for them. As one doctor, J. Katz, wrote, "It is dangerous nonsense to assert that. Physicians can rely on their benevolent intentions, their abilities to judge what is the right thing to do."
Patients have their own values.
Precisely. Similarly, I can't sit here and tell you exactly what you should do with your money. Because I don't know you. I don't know your unique goals, your deepest desires, your specific timeline, your personal tolerance for risk and regret. Important financial decisions. They're rarely made just looking at spreadsheets or textbooks. They're made at the dinner table. Often not with the goal of maximizing some abstract return, but maybe with the goal of minimizing the chance of disappointing your spouse or your kids, or just maximizing your own peace of mind.
Deeply personal.
Deeply personal.
Yeah.
But there are indeed universal truths that apply across the board, even if how you apply them to your own finances is unique to you.
Okay, so let's look at some of these incredibly valuable, actionable insights. Let's stick through them. First, consciously cultivate humility when things are going well for you, and practice forgiveness and compassion towards yourself and others when things go wrong.
Crucial first step.
Remember, it's never as good or as bad as it seems on the surface. Recognizing those invisible hands of luck and risk helps you focus on what you can actually control and helps you choose the right role models, not just the super lucky outliers.
Exactly. And building right on that. Embrace less ego, aim for more wealth. Wealth, as we discussed, is fundamentally that gap between your ego and your income. It's built by consciously suppressing what you could buy today, what your ego might be screaming for.
We're resisting the urge.
In order to have more options, more security, and more genuine independence down the road.
Then this one feels key. Manage your money in a way that genuinely helps you sleep at night.
The sleep at night test again.
This, above all else, should be your best universal guidepost, regardless of what any formula says or what some expert tells you about maximizing returns on paper. For some people, sleeping well means chasing high returns. For others, it means incredibly conservative investing. Find what gives you peace of mind.
Absolutely. And critical to that long-term peace of mind, increase your time horizon. Time, as we saw so powerfully with compounding, is the most potent force in investing. It makes small things grow incredibly big over decades, and it helps big mistakes fade away, pushing your overall results closer to what consistent effort and patience really deserve.
Next one. Become truly okay with a lot of things going wrong.
That's a hard one for perfectionists.
It is. But you can be wrong, maybe even half the time with individual investments, and still make a fortune. Because a small minority of your decisions will likely account for the vast majority of your outcomes. Think like a venture capitalist expecting some duds, or a movie studio knowing some films will flop. Judge your full financial portfolio, not just the individual wins and losses in isolation.
Great point. And this next one might be the ultimate goal we discussed. Use money primarily to gain control over your time. That ability to genuinely do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, for as long as you want, without external financial pressures, that pays the highest dividend in finance. Far more valuable than any material thing you can buy.
Practice being nicer and less flashy. Seems simple, but humility, kindness, empathy. They bring far more genuine respect and admiration in the long run than any expensive possession ever will. People are impressed by the beautiful car, maybe, but not necessarily the person driving it, right? That paradox again.
And maybe simplify all this down to just save. Save money. Don't just save for specific earmarked goals like a house or retirement. Those are important. But also save just as a fundamental hedge against life's inevitable surprises, those unexpected costs that always pop up.
Saving for the unknown.
Exactly. Saving purely for the sake of having unallocated capital buys you crucial options and invaluable flexibility for those unforeseen field mice moments that can derail even the most carefully laid plans.
Define the true cost of success and be genuinely ready to pay it. Nothing truly worthwhile is free.
No, free lunch.
Volatility, fear, doubt, regret. These aren't fines or punishments you get for trying to achieve good returns. View them as fees, like the admission ticket to a great concert. They're just the price you pay for being in the game and potentially achieving genuinely good results over the long term. Embrace them as part of the process.
Crucially important mindset shift there. And related. Like risk. Learn to embrace calculated risk, but be profoundly paranoid of ruinous risk. No single risk that has even a small potential to wipe you out completely, to take you out of the game permanently, is ever worth taking. Ever.
Survival first.
The odds of potentially lucrative things might be in your favor, sure. But if the downside is total ruin, if it means you can't survive to play another day, it's simply not worth the gamble. You absolutely have to survive to ultimately succeed.
Define the game you're playing. This feels critical too.
Very much so.
Don't let yourself be swayed, influenced, or intimidated by people playing a completely different game. They might have totally different goals, different time horizons, different risk tolerances than you. The kind of volatility that makes sense for a day trader's game, for instance, could be an absolute disaster for a long-term investor saving for retirement. Know your own game.
And finally, maybe underpinning all of this, respect the mess. Recognize that smart, informed, reasonable people can, and often will, profoundly disagree on financial matters.
It's not always black and white.
Not at all. That's because financial decisions are so deeply personal. They're rooted in our individual histories, our values, our fears, our hopes. There's rarely a single right answer, no one-size-fits-all optimal strategy. There's only what genuinely works for you.
Okay, so knowing these incredibly powerful principles, these universal truths, that's one thing, and it's a huge step forward. But truly applying them, living them out in your daily financial life, that's an entirely different challenge, isn't it?
It really is. The knowing-doing gap.
And our sources highlight this common and fascinating gap between what people advise others to do with their money and what they actually choose to do themselves.
Yeah, what's truly fascinating here is that insightful interview question posed by the investor Sandy Gottsman. What do you own and why?
Simple question.
Simple, but it cuts right to the core. It often reveals that mile-wide gap between what makes perfect sense on paper, what people rationally suggest you should do, and what feels emotionally right in practice, what they actually choose to do. Just like doctors might choose different end-of-life treatments for themselves than they recommend for their patients, financial decisions often aren't about purely maximizing mathematical returns on a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
They're often about profoundly minimizing the chance of disappointing a spouse or a child. Or maybe just cultivating a personal sense of security, that sleep-at-night factor. There really is no singular, universal truth for everyone. There's only what works for you and your family, what truly checks the boxes you want checked, in a way that leaves you feeling comfortable, secure, and, well, sleeping well at night.
That resonates. My own family's approach to money, actually, has been profoundly influenced by these very principles. It's fundamentally built around the concept of independence.
Independence as the core goal.
Yeah. My parents, after years of being incredibly frugal, disciplined savers, they gained the ability to simply stop working when they'd had enough. My dad was an ER doctor, high-stress job. After 2 decades, he just quit when he hit his independence number, moved on to things he genuinely enjoyed.
Wow, that's powerful.
That lesson stuck with me deeply. So we, in our family, we aim to only do work we truly like, with people we genuinely like, and ideally on our own terms. And we've achieved this largely by consciously maintaining the same moderate lifestyle we enjoyed back in our 20s, even though our incomes have risen significantly over the years.
Keeping the lifestyle steady?
Exactly. Which means our goalpost for desires, for what we feel we need, has largely stopped moving. Almost every raise, every bonus goes directly into our independence fund. And we rarely feel like we're being repressively frugal, precisely because our aspirations haven't inflated much. It's a kind of quiet financial freedom.
That personal choice, maintaining an unchanging lifestyle even as income rises, it raises an important question for many. Why is that so powerful, so effective, beyond just piling up more cash?
Yeah.
Because it continuously, almost effortlessly, increases your savings rate without making you feel deprived or like you're constantly sacrificing. It creates the significant buffer against external social pressure, too. It removes a huge amount of that exhausting keeping up with the Joneses dynamic.
That's a great point. And is another personal example? We even own our house outright now, no mortgage.
Paid off the house completely.
Yep. Now, on paper, purely financially, it's arguably the worst decision we could have made, right? Given how low interest rates have been, the potential higher returns we might have earned investing that capital elsewhere.
The spreadsheet would probably scream, don't do it.
Exactly. But for us, for our family, it's the best money decision we've ever made. The profound, independent feeling of having no monthly mortgage payment hanging over our heads. The immense sense of security and peace it brings that far outweighs any potential missed financial gains on some spreadsheet.
The psychological return.
Totally. Eliminating that payment makes me feel genuinely independent. It helps us sleep incredibly well at night. Good decisions, we've learned firsthand, aren't always strictly rational by the numbers. Sometimes you absolutely have to choose between being happy and being purely right. My investing strategy, too, has shifted significantly over the years, moved away from trying to pick individual stocks,
Which takes a lot of time and effort.
and shifted primarily to using low-cost index funds. These broad market funds, tracking things like the S&P 500, give you wide diversification without trying to be a genius stock picker. I made this shift not because I think stock picking is impossible or doomed, but because using index funds simply has the highest odds of long-term success for our specific goals and temperament.
Playing the probabilities that suit you.
Right. It relies on a high savings rate, immense patience, and just an enduring optimism in global growth over the long haul. It's simple, it's robust, and crucially, it works for us. Because ultimately, as we said right at the start of this deep dive, no one's crazy.
No one's crazy. It all comes back to that.
So as we wrap up today's deep dive, what stands out most powerfully to you from our conversation? What's the big takeaway? We've explored this profound idea that our financial decisions are just so deeply intertwined with our unique personal experiences. Those invisible yet potent forces of luck and risk, our sometimes endless and dangerous pursuit of more, and that often counterintuitive yet exponential power of time. We've learned that being reasonable often trumps being purely rational, and that the world, despite all our best efforts to predict it, will always, always surprise us.
It certainly will. And if we connect all of this to the bigger picture, maybe something for you to really mull over long after this deep dive ends, consider this. Our financial world and our behavior within it, it isn't static. It is constantly dynamically evolving. The very structures that define past financial success, like the whole concept of widespread retirement, or even easy, affordable home ownership, these are relatively new ideas, emerging largely only after World War II.
Things that we take for granted are actually quite recent.
Very recent in the grand scheme. We've seen unprecedented economic booms, periods of intense inequality, massive cultural shifts in things like our acceptance of debt, our levels of consumerism. This ongoing, unpredictable evolution raises an important, maybe challenging question for your own financial journey. If history is indeed a guide, but it's also undeniably full of unprecedented surprises and profound structural changes, how will your personal beliefs about money, your deeply held narratives, need to adapt to the next unpredictable chapter? And maybe even more intriguingly, what new appealing fictions, what new stories that you might desperately want to be true, perhaps about effortless wealth or guaranteed safety, what new appealing fictions might emerge as the financial landscape continues to shift in ways we can barely even imagine today?
Thanks for tuning in to the Book Summary Podcast. If you found value in today's episode, hit that like button, subscribe for more summaries, and share it with someone who's ready to grow. Want deeper insights, exclusive book notes, and reading tips? Join our free newsletter. The link's in the description. And don't forget, if you'd like to read the full book, our affiliate link is right below. It helps support the channel and keeps the summaries coming. Until next time, keep reading, keep growing.